When a disgraced mechanic walked into the fortress of America's most ruthless female billionaire, he wasn't there to steal her fortune. He was there to fix a broken wheelchair. But the terrifying secret he uncovered about her paralyzed daughter's medical care would leave the titanium-willed CEO sobbing on her knees. Vicki Turner was not a woman who accepted the word impossible. As the CEO and majority shareholder of Turner Vanguard Pharmaceuticals, a biomedical empire valued at $42 billion, she was accustomed to bending the world to her absolute will. From her glass-walled office overlooking the Seattle skyline, she orchestrated corporate takeovers, dictated healthcare trends, and routinely crushed her competitors. She was feared in boardrooms from Wall Street to Silicon Valley. But all the money in the world, and all the influence she wielded, stopped at the threshold of her sprawling estate in Medina, Washington. Inside that cavernous modern mansion lived the one problem Vicki could not buy her way out of: her 10-year-old daughter, Chloe. 2 years ago, a catastrophic accident on a rain-slicked stretch of the Pacific Coast Highway near Big Sur had sent their chauffeur-driven SUV tumbling down a ravine. Vicki had walked away with a fractured collarbone and a concussion. Chloe had not walked away at all. A severe spinal cord injury at the T10 vertebra had left the vibrant, horse-riding little girl completely paralyzed from the waist down. Since that day, Vicki had waged a desperate blank-check war against her daughter's paralysis. She had flown in the top neurosurgeons from Cedars-Sinai and Johns Hopkins. She had funded experimental stem cell research in Switzerland. She had hired Dr. Arthur Pendleton, the nation's foremost pediatric neurologist, on an exclusive $2 million annual retainer just to oversee Chloe's daily rehabilitation. Yet, despite the endless parade of specialists and state-of-the-art equipment, Chloe's legs remained motionless. Worse, the light in the little girl's eyes had systematically dimmed, replaced by a hollow, haunting resignation. Across the city, in a cramped two-bedroom apartment in a fading neighborhood, Darby Harrison was dealing with a very different kind of reality. Darby was a single father, a widower who had lost his wife to aggressive ovarian cancer 5 years prior. The medical bills had stripped him of his savings, his home, and eventually his focus. Before the tragedy, Darby had been a brilliant biomechanical engineer. He had co-founded a promising startup, Apex Neural Prosthetics, designing neuro-responsive limbs for veterans. But as his wife's health declined, Darby missed crucial investor meetings and product deadlines. His ruthless business partners had orchestrated a boardroom coup, forcing him out of his own company for pennies on the dollar. Now, blacklisted by the industry and desperate to keep a roof over the head of his 8-year-old son, Leo, Darby worked as a mobile repair technician for a high-end medical supply company. He spent his days driving a battered white van, fixing stair lifts, calibrating hospital beds, and repairing electric wheelchairs. It was a humiliating fall from grace, but Darby swallowed his pride daily for Leo. He was a quiet, observant man whose calloused hands hid a genius-level intellect for mechanical and neurological integration. On a dreary Tuesday morning, Darby's dispatcher crackled over the radio. "Harrison, I've got a priority one. Red alert. The Turner estate in Medina. The kid's custom mobility chair is throwing error codes, and the mother is threatening to sue the manufacturer into the Stone Age. Get out there and make it go away." Darby sighed, wiping grease from his forehead. "Turner? As in Vicki Turner?" "The one and only," the dispatcher replied, a wince evident in his voice. "Don't look her in the eye, Dave. Just fix the chair and get out." An hour later, Darby's rusted van pulled up to the imposing wrought iron gates of the Turner estate. Security guards subjected him to a 10-minute background check, sweeping his vehicle with mirrors before the heavy gates slowly swung open. As he drove up the winding, meticulously manicured driveway, Darby felt a pang of bitterness. The cost of the landscaping alone could have paid off his late wife's medical debts 10 times over. He was escorted into the home by a stern, unsmiling housekeeper named Mrs. Gable. The interior of the mansion felt less like a home and more like a high-end art gallery. Everything was sharp angles, cold marble, and sterile silence. "Miss Chloe is in the East Wing solarium," Mrs. Gable instructed, her heels clicking sharply on the imported stone floors. "You are to repair the chair quickly. Do not disturb her therapy schedule." Darby nodded silently, gripping his heavy metal toolbox. As they approached the solarium, he heard the low hum of machinery and a child's soft, frustrated sigh. He stepped into the bright, glass-enclosed room and stopped in his tracks. In the center of the room sat Chloe. She was small for her age, engulfed in a massive, hyper-modern, titanium alloy power chair that looked more like a piece of space equipment than a mobility aid. Her legs were encased in rigid, heavy carbon fiber braces that ran from her hips to her ankles. Standing over her was Dr. Arthur Pendleton, a tall, impeccably dressed man with silver hair and a condescending sneer. He was dictating notes to an iPad while a physical therapist manipulated Chloe's lifeless legs. The muscle atrophy is accelerating despite the passive motion therapy, Dr. Pendleton was saying, his tone clinical and detached, as if the little girl couldn't hear him. We will need to increase the rigidity of the hip stabilizers to prevent scoliosis. Have the lab manufacture thicker braces. Chloe stared blankly out the window at the rain, a single tear tracking down her pale cheek. "Excuse me," Darby interrupted, his voice steady, despite the tension in the room. "I'm here from the manufacturer to look at the chair." Dr. Pendleton turned, looking Darby up and down, clearly repulsed by the mechanic's faded uniform and scuffed boots. "Make it quick. The drivetrain is completely uncalibrated. The joystick pulls to the left, and the gyroscopes are overcompensating. It's a $50,000 piece of garbage." Darby didn't respond to the doctor. Instead, he walked over to the chair and knelt down until he was eye level with Chloe. He offered a warm, genuine smile, something the girl hadn't seen from a stranger in a very long time. "Hi," Darby said softly. "I'm Darby. I hear your ride is giving you some trouble." Chloe blinked, surprised that he was talking directly to her and not over her head. "It fights me," she whispered. "When I try to go forward, it jerks. It hurts my back." Darby nodded, setting his toolbox down. "Let's see if we can teach it some manners." As Darby began to run diagnostic tests on the complex machinery of the wheelchair, his trained eye immediately caught something strange. This wasn't just a standard mechanical failure. The chair was designed to be neuro-responsive, meaning it was supposed to read subtle postural shifts and micro-movements in Chloe's core to anticipate her steering, making the joystick more of a secondary control. But as he hooked his battered laptop into the chair's motherboard, the telemetry data made no sense. The sensors positioned near her lower back were being actively jammed. Darby frowned, tracing the wiring with his fingers. His hands brushed against the thick, heavy carbon fiber braces Dr. Pendleton had prescribed. He stopped. He looked closer at the braces. As a former biomechanical engineer who had designed cutting-edge prosthetics, Darby knew exoskeletons inside and out. These braces were completely wrong. They weren't just supporting Chloe's legs. They were actively compressing her lumbar spine and restricting the pelvis in a way that would completely choke off any potential nerve regeneration. They were designed to lock her into a permanent, static, seated position. Furthermore, the thick magnetic locks on the braces were causing electromagnetic interference with the wheelchair's neurosensors, which was why the chair was glitching. "Who designed these braces?" Darby asked, looking up. Dr. Pendleton, who had been scrolling through his phone, snapped his head up. "I beg your pardon? What does that have to do with the chair?" "The magnetic housing on these hip stabilizers is creating an EMF field that's frying the chair's directional sensors," Darby explained calmly. "But more importantly, these braces are heavily compressing the T10 through L2 vertebrae. They are far too rigid. It's cutting off microcirculation." Pendleton's face flushed red with aristocratic fury. "Are you a mechanic? Or did you find a medical degree in that rusty toolbox of yours? Those braces are custom milled to my exact specifications." "They are keeping her spine straight." "They're acting like a tourniquet on her central nervous system," Darby shot back, forgetting for a moment that he was just a repairman trying to keep his job. If you lock a damaged spine into a rigid cage, the surrounding dormant nerves can't seek new pathways. You're guaranteeing she never feels her legs again. "How dare you!" Pendleton roared, stepping forward. "You are a grease monkey. You will fix the joystick and you will leave this house immediately." The shouting caused the heavy oak doors of the solarium to swing open. In walked Vicky Turner. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Vicky wore a sharp, charcoal gray designer suit, her dark hair pulled back into a severe chignon. Her piercing blue eyes swept the room, taking in the red-faced doctor, the greasy mechanic, and her trembling daughter. What exactly is going on in here? Vicky demanded, her voice a lethal whisper that commanded absolute obedience. Vicky, this technician is completely out of line, Dr. Pendleton sputtered, rushing to her side. He is attempting to give unsolicited, dangerous medical opinions about Chloe's orthotics. I want him thrown off the property. Vicky turned her freezing gaze onto Darby. Is this true? Are you offering medical advice to my daughter, Mr. Harrison? Darby Harrison, he said, standing up. He felt the overwhelming urge to apologize, to pack up his tools and flee so he wouldn't lose his job or jeopardize his son's future. But then he looked down at Chloe. She was looking up at him, her small hands gripping the armrests of her chair. She looked so much like his son, Leo, when he was frightened. Darby couldn't walk away. Miss Turner, I am here to fix the wheelchair, Darby said, keeping his voice level, and I can do that. I can shield the sensors. But the reason the chair is malfunctioning is because of the braces your doctor has put on your daughter. They are creating an electromagnetic field. But beyond that, my background is in biomechanical engineering. I built neuroprosthetics for amputees. I know how the body interacts with external support. These braces are actively hindering her recovery. Vicky stared at him, her expression unreadable. For 2 years, she had been surrounded by yes men, by highly paid doctors who nodded at her every word and charged her millions for the privilege. No one had ever spoken to her with such blunt, unfiltered authority. He's a madman, Pendleton hissed. He works for a cut-rate repair service. Are you going to listen to a man who smells like motor oil over the chief of neurology at Cedars-Sinai? Vicky looked from Pendleton to Darby, then down at Chloe. Is the chair fixed? She asked Darby. Give me 5 minutes to install an EMF shield over the motherboard, Darby said. Do it. Then leave, Vicky commanded. Darby nodded tightly. He knelt back down, pulling a roll of copper shielding tape from his box. As he worked, leaning close to Chloe, he whispered so only she could hear. I'm going to loosen the tension dial on your left hip brace just a fraction of a millimeter. It shouldn't hurt, but tell me if you feel anything. With a sleight of hand born from years of precision engineering, Darby subtly adjusted the locking mechanism on the heavily restrictive brace, releasing the immense, invisible pressure it had been exerting on her lower spine. Suddenly, Chloe gasped. Her hands flew to her lap. Her eyes widened to the size of saucers. Chloe? Vicky asked, her maternal instinct instantly overriding her icy CEO persona. She rushed forward, dropping to her knees beside the chair. Chloe, darling, what is it? Are you in pain? Chloe was staring at her left leg. Mom, she whispered, her voice trembling. Mom, it tingles. Silence fell over the solarium. It was absolute, deafening silence. Dr. Pendleton dropped his iPad. It clattered loudly against the stone floor, the screen spider-webbing with cracks. What did you say? Vicky breathed, grabbing her daughter's hands. My leg. The left one, Chloe said. Tears welling in her eyes, not of despair but of shock. It feels fuzzy, like it's asleep. Mom, I can feel it. For 2 years, there had been nothing. Not a spasm, not a phantom pain, not a single electrical impulse below her waist. And now, a tingle. Vicky's head whipped around to stare at Darby. The mechanic had just packed his laptop back into his toolbox and was quietly snapping the latches shut. What did you do? Vicky demanded, her voice shaking with an emotion she hadn't felt in 24 months. Hope. I took the parking brake off her nervous system, Darby said simply. He stood up, slinging his heavy toolbox over his shoulder. He looked at Dr. Pendleton, whose face had gone an ashen, sickly white. You might want to ask your doctor why he's keeping her in a cage. Without another word, Darby turned and walked out of the solarium, leaving the billionaire CEO kneeling on the floor, weeping as she held her daughter's tingling leg. The fallout inside the Turner estate was swift and terrifying. True to her reputation in the corporate world, Vicky Turner did not merely get angry, she went to war. Within 10 minutes of Darby Harrison's departure, Vicky had her legal team on a conference call. Doctor, Arthur Pendleton was stripped of his retainer, escorted off the premises by 4 armed security guards, and served with a preliminary injunction freezing his assets pending a full medical malpractice investigation. Pendleton's protests and threats of legal retaliation echoed down the marble hallways, but Vicky simply watched him from the top of the sweeping staircase, her eyes cold enough to freeze nitrogen. Once the house was quiet, she sat by Chloe's bed. Her daughter was exhausted, but radiating a fragile, nervous energy. The tingling in her left leg had faded to a dull warmth, but the fact that the sensation existed at all was a medical miracle. Or rather, as Vicky was beginning to suspect, the suppression of it had been a deliberate medical nightmare. Leaving Chloe in the care of her trusted nurses, Vicky retreated to her home office. She bypassed her usual corporate fixers and dialed the direct line of a high-end private intelligence firm she kept on retainer for hostile takeovers. "I need everything you can find on a man named Darby Harrison," Vicky commanded into the phone. "He works for Cascade Mobility Repairs. I want his employment history, his financial records, his medical background, and his education. Dig deep. Have it on my desk by midnight." At 11:45 p.m., a secure encrypted file arrived in her inbox. As Vicky read through the 80-page dossier, her perfectly manicured hands tightened into fists. Darby Harrison wasn't just a mechanic. He held dual PhDs from MIT in biomechanical engineering and neurobiology. He was the original founder and lead patent holder of Apex Neuroprosthetics. The file detailed his tragic backstory: the agonizing decline of his wife from ovarian cancer, the mounting medical debts, and the devastating corporate coup orchestrated by his ruthless co-founder, Gregory Hale. Hale had exploited Darby's grief-stricken absence to dilute his shares, steal his proprietary blueprints, and oust him from the very company he had built. Blacklisted by Hale's powerful connections in the biomedical industry, Darby had been reduced to fixing wheelchairs to keep a roof over the head of his young son, Leo. But it was the cross-reference data at the end of the dossier that made Vicky's blood run cold. The intelligence firm had flagged a financial connection. Gregory Hale's company, Apex Neural, was the primary financial backer of a massive, upcoming clinical trial for a revolutionary, highly invasive spinal fusion surgery. The lead medical director for that upcoming trial? Dr. Arthur Pendleton. The pieces snapped together with horrifying clarity. Pendleton needed a high-profile failure to justify the FDA fast-tracking his experimental, highly lucrative surgical procedure. Chloe wasn't just his patient, she was his proof of concept. He had deliberately prescribed heavily restrictive orthotics to ensure her paralysis remained permanent, setting the stage for his miraculous, multi-million-dollar surgical intervention. He had literally locked a 10-year-old girl in a carbon fiber prison for his own stock portfolio. Tears of pure, unadulterated rage spilled down Vicky's cheeks. She had paid a monster millions of dollars to torture her daughter, and a broken, disgraced father in a rusted white van had been the only one brave enough to stop it. The next morning, Darby was sitting in his cramped kitchen, spreading cheap peanut butter onto toast for his son, Leo. The apartment smelled of old coffee and radiator dust. He was mentally calculating if he could afford to buy Leo the new soccer cleats he needed, knowing he was likely going to be fired today for yelling at a billionaire's doctor. A heavy knock echoed on the peeling veneer of his apartment door. Darby sighed, patting Leo on the shoulder. "Eat up, buddy. I'll get it." He opened the door to find the hallway entirely blocked by a wall of men in tailored black suits. Standing in front of them, looking utterly out of place in the dingy, flickering fluorescent light of the apartment complex, was Vicky Turner. She was dressed in a pristine white trench coat, looking every bit the ruler of a financial empire. "Miss Turner," Darby said, his guard immediately going up. He didn't invite her in. "If you're here to fire me, my dispatcher already sent the termination email." "I am not here to fire you, Dr. Harrison," Vicky said, using his academic title deliberately. "I am here to hire you." Darby blinked, his eyes narrowing. "I'm not a doctor anymore. I fix chairs." "You are the founder of Apex Neural, and you are the only person who has given my daughter a shred of hope in 2 years," Vicky said, her voice dropping to an intense, urgent timbre. "I know what Gregory Hale did to you. I know what Arthur Pendleton was doing to my daughter. I intend to destroy them both. But right now, My only priority is Chloe. Vicky reached into her coat and pulled out a sleek black leather folder. She held it out to him. This is a contract for exclusive employment, she stated. You will have a $10 million operating budget, a private laboratory built to your exact specifications on my estate, and a salary that will ensure your son never has to worry about his future. In exchange, you will build the neural exoskeleton my daughter needs to walk again. Darby stared at the folder, then at the desperate, fierce mother standing before him. For the first time in 5 years, the spark of his old genius, the fire that had been extinguished by grief and betrayal, flared back to life. I'll need titanium carbon fiber weaves, Darby said quietly, and I don't work well with corporate oversight. Vicky offered a razor-thin smile. You answer only to me, and I only care about results. Over the next 3 months, the guest house of the Turner estate was transformed into the most advanced biomechanical laboratory in the Pacific Northwest. Darby worked relentlessly, fueled by endless pots of black coffee and the terrifying, exhilarating pressure of his task. He was building what he called the Dynamic Neural Interface Suit, DNIS. Unlike the rigid, suffocating braces Pendleton had used, Darby's design utilized a flexible, biosynthetic mesh woven with microscopic sensors. The suit was designed to act as an artificial nervous system, reading the faint, misfiring electrical signals from Chloe's damaged spinal cord, amplifying them, and translating them into mechanical movement through feather-light titanium hydraulic actuators. The mansion changed too. The sterile, icy silence of the Turner estate was replaced by the sounds of a home. Darby's son, Leo, frequently came to the estate after school. To Vicky's initial shock, the boisterous 8-year-old broke right through Chloe's walls of depression. Soon, the massive hallways echoed with the sounds of their laughter as Leo pushed Chloe's newly repaired wheelchair through the house at breakneck speeds, playing laser tag. Vicky found herself frequently standing in the doorway of the laboratory, watching Darby work. She admired his quiet focus, his gentle patience when testing the sensors on Chloe's legs, and the way he spoke to her daughter not as a patient, but as a partner in a great scientific experiment. The ruthless billionaire CEO was softening, her heart thawing under the influence of this humble, brilliant man. You're pushing the servo motors too hard, Vicky noted one evening, stepping into the lab and handing Darby a cup of coffee. Darby looked up, wiping grease from his cheek, surprised by her presence. The actuators need to mirror natural human gait. If they lag even a millisecond, her brain will reject the artificial proprioception. He took the coffee. Thanks. You're hovering again, boss? Vicky smiled, a genuine, warm expression that completely transformed her face. I'm protecting my investment, Darby. The investment is ready for a field test, Darby said, his tone turning serious. He looked over to where Chloe was sitting on a physical therapy table, the sleek, black and silver DNIS mesh encasing her legs and lower torso. Vicky's breath caught in her throat. She walked over to her daughter, taking her small hands. Are you ready, sweetheart? Chloe nodded, her eyes wide and determined. I trust Darby, Mom. Darby booted up the master control console. Okay, Chloe, we're activating the neural relay in 3, 2, 1. Powering up. A soft, high-pitched hum filled the room. The microscopic lights woven into the fabric of the suit glowed a faint, pulsing blue. Don't try to move the suit, Darby instructed gently. Just think about standing up. Let your brain do the talking. Chloe closed her eyes in intense concentration. Seconds ticked by. Nothing happened. Vicky felt a crushing weight settling on her chest. Perhaps it was a fool's errand. Perhaps the damage was just too severe. Then there was a sharp click whir. Chloe's right foot twitched. The hydraulic actuator at her knee engaged. Slowly, agonizingly, with the mechanical whine of the servos masking the sound of Vicky's suppressed gasp. Chloe's right leg straightened, then the left. With Darby holding her shoulders to balance her, Chloe pushed off the table. She stood. For the first time in 2 years, Chloe Turner stood at her full height, bearing her own weight, supported by a miracle of engineering and empathy. She opened her eyes, looking down at her legs, and burst into tears. Vicky collapsed to her knees, wrapping her arms around her daughter's waist, weeping openly, her face pressed against the cold titanium of the knee joints. "I'm standing, Mom," Chloe sobbed, burying her face in Darby's shoulder. "I'm standing." Darby closed his eyes, fighting back his own tears, a profound sense of redemption washing over him. But 100 miles away, in a sleek corporate boardroom in downtown Seattle, a different kind of plan was being finalized. Gregory Hale, the CEO of Apex Neural, slammed a thick stack of legal documents onto his mahogany conference table. Sitting across from him was a disgraced, deeply bitter Dr. Arthur Pendleton. "My moles inside the Turner estate confirm it," Hale sneered. Looking at blurry drone photographs of Darby carrying equipment into the guest house, "Harrison is building a new exoskeleton. He's using our proprietary interface theory, the theory I legally own." "You need to stop him, Gregory," Pendleton hissed, his medical license currently hanging by a thread due to Vicky's relentless legal assault. "If that girl walks, my career is over. I'm facing criminal negligence charges." "Oh, I'll stop him," Hale smiled, a cold, predatory grimace. "But we aren't just going to sue him. Turner has too much money. She could drag a patent lawsuit out for a decade. We need to hit her where it hurts. We need to take the girl." Hale slid a phone across the table to Pendleton. "You are still, technically, the last licensed neurologist on record for Chloe Turner. You are going to call Child Protective Services. You are going to report that Vicky Turner has gone insane, that she is subjecting her disabled child to unregulated, un-FDA-approved mechanical experimentation by an unlicensed mechanic." Pendleton's eyes lit up with malicious glee. Medical child abuse. It's a mandatory, immediate removal. "Exactly," Hale said. "They take the kid, they seize the equipment as evidence, which I will reclaim as stolen intellectual property, and Harrison goes to prison for practicing medicine without a license." 3 days later, the atmosphere inside the Turner estate was euphoric. Chloe was taking assisted steps across the solarium, her laughter ringing out like music. Darby and Vicky stood side by side, their shoulders brushing, watching the miracle unfold. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors of the solarium burst open. Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper, ran into the room, her usually stoic face pale with terror. "Miss Turner! Security couldn't stop them!" Following close behind her were 4 armed police officers, accompanied by 2 stern-faced agents from the Department of Child and Family Services. And standing behind them, wearing a smug, triumphant smirk, was Dr. Arthur Pendleton. "Vicky Turner," the lead CPS agent announced, flashing a badge. "We have an emergency court order. We are here to take your daughter into protective custody." The air in the solarium turned to ice. The joy that had just filled the room evaporated, replaced by a suffocating, terrifying tension. Vicky Turner did not scream. She did not panic. The maternal tears on her face instantly dried, replaced by the hardened, impenetrable mask of the ruthless CEO who had conquered Wall Street. She slowly stood up, placing herself squarely between the armed officers, the Child Protective Services agents, and her trembling daughter. "You have exactly 10 seconds to explain why you are trespassing in my home before I have my security team physically remove you and my legal team sue the city into bankruptcy," Vicky stated. Her voice wasn't raised, but it carried a lethal frequency that made the lead police officer visibly flinch. The CPS agent, a stern woman clutching a clipboard, held her ground. "Miss Turner, I am Agent Miller. We received a credible, urgent report from a licensed medical professional. You are accused of medical child endangerment. We have a court order signed by Judge Higgins authorizing the immediate removal of Chloe Turner pending a full investigation into the unregulated, illegal mechanical experimentation being performed on her." Dr. Pendleton stepped out from behind the officers, a triumphant, sickening smile plastered across his face. "It's over, Vicky. You've lost your mind. Letting a disgraced wheelchair mechanic strap illegal, dangerous hardware onto a paralyzed child? It's child abuse. The state is taking over Chloe's care, and your little grease monkey is going to federal prison." Darby clenched his fists, stepping up to stand shoulder to shoulder with Vicky. He looked at the CPS agent. "The equipment she is wearing is not dangerous. It's a dynamic neural interface suit, and it is actively repairing her neural pathways. She just stood up for the first time in 2 years. Save it for the judge, Mr. Harrison, Pendleton sneered. You don't hold a medical license. You are violating federal law by building non-FDA-approved medical devices and practicing medicine on a minor. Officers, arrest him. And seize that machinery. It belongs to Apex Neural. 2 police officers took a step forward, reaching for their handcuffs. Stop right there, Vicky commanded, holding up a single, manicured hand. The absolute authority in her voice halted the officers in their tracks. She reached into the pocket of her blazer and pulled out her phone. Agent Miller, you mentioned Judge Higgins signed that order? Yes, ma'am. 10 minutes ago, the agent replied, her confidence wavering slightly. Interesting, Vicky said, tapping her screen. Because 20 minutes ago, I was on a conference call with the regional director of the Federal Drug Administration and the governor of Washington State. You see, when Dr. Pendleton here so foolishly underestimated me, he assumed I was just a desperate mother. He forgot that I am the CEO of a $42 billion biomedical empire. Vicky pressed a button on her phone, casting an array of heavily stamped official legal documents onto the massive smart screen mounted on the solarium wall. This, Vicky pointed to the screen, is an official FDA compassionate use expedited trial authorization. It completely bypasses standard waiting periods for experimental treatments in catastrophic pediatric cases. It was approved at 8:00 a.m. this morning. Pendleton's smug smile began to slip. That's impossible. You can't get that without a licensed medical director overseeing the trial. I know, Vicky replied smoothly. She looked toward the hallway. Dr. Eris Thorne, please come in. A distinguished woman in a white coat walked into the room. It was the chief of neurology at Seattle General Hospital, Pendleton's fiercest rival and a widely respected ethical watchdog in the medical community. I am the medical director of this trial, Doctor, Thorne announced, handing a folder to the stunned CPS agent. Dr. Darby Harrison is operating as my lead bioengineer. Everything happening in this house is strictly regulated, legally sanctioned, and fully insured. Furthermore, Dr. Pendleton's claim of child endangerment is entirely fraudulent. This is a trick, Pendleton shouted, his face flushing crimson. The intellectual property he is using belongs to Gregory Hale and Apex Neural. He stole it! Actually, Darby spoke up, his voice calm but laced with righteous anger, I didn't steal anything. When Gregory Hale ousted me from Apex Neural, he stole my blueprints. But he was too arrogant to realize that the core operating algorithm for the neural mesh was coded under a separate, encrypted copyright held by my late wife's estate. He owns the metal. I own the brain. Vicky stepped forward, her eyes locking onto Pendleton with devastating intensity. And to ensure there were no loose ends, yesterday afternoon, Turner Vanguard Pharmaceuticals initiated a hostile takeover of Apex Neural. We flooded the market, bought out their panicking shareholders, and acquired a controlling interest. Gregory Hale was fired 3 hours ago. He has nothing, and neither do you. Pendleton backed away, bumping into the police officers. His world was collapsing in real time. Agent Miller, Vicky said softly, turning back to the CPS worker. If you look at the second document in Dr. Thorne's folder, you will see a federal indictment. My private investigators uncovered the offshore accounts Gregory Hale used to bribe Judge Higgins for that emergency order you're holding. The FBI is currently raiding Hale's penthouse. The CPS agent looked at the paperwork, then at Dr. Pendleton, realizing she had been used as a pawn in a massive, illegal corporate conspiracy. She quickly folded her clipboard against her chest. Officers, stand down. Wait! Pendleton shrieked, panic breaking his voice. She's paralyzed. You can't leave her with these lunatics. At that moment, the hydraulic servos in the room whined. Everyone turned. Chloe Turner, wearing the sleek, blue-glowing neural suit, had pushed herself off the physical therapy table. She didn't just stand this time. With her eyes locked on Pendleton, her small face set in an expression of fierce determination that perfectly mirrored her mother's, Chloe took a step forward. Click whir, her foot hit the stone floor. She shifted her weight, the suit balancing her perfectly, and took another step. Click whir. She walked directly past the stunned police officers, past the speechless CPS agent, and stopped right in front of Dr. Pendleton. "You kept me in a cage," the 10-year-old girl said, her voice echoing in the dead silent room. "Darby set me free. Get out of my house." The aftermath of the solarium standoff shook the medical and corporate worlds to their foundations. The story leaked to the press, creating a media firestorm that dominated the news cycle for months. Dr. Arthur Pendleton was stripped of his medical license and sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for medical fraud, severe malpractice, and criminal conspiracy. Gregory Hale received 15 years for corporate espionage, bribery, and embezzlement. The judge who had signed the fraudulent CPS order was disgraced and disbarred. Apex Neural, now a subsidiary of Turner Vanguard, was completely restructured. Vicky handed the reins of the company back to the man who had founded it. Dr. Darby Harrison was reinstated as CEO and lead developer. With Vicky's billions backing his genius, Darby's dynamic neural interface suit went into full-scale production. Within a year, thousands of paralyzed individuals, veterans, and accident victims around the globe were walking again, their lives restored by the technology born from a father's grief and a mother's desperation. But the most profound changes happened inside the walls of the Medina estate. It was a brilliant, sun-drenched Saturday in June, 1 year after the day Darby's rusted van had first pulled through the gates. The manicured lawns were covered in white chairs, decorated with vibrant arrays of spring flowers. A string quartet played softly in the background. Standing at the altar beneath a beautiful floral arch was Darby, wearing a sharp, tailored tuxedo. Beside him stood his son, Leo, proudly holding a velvet ring box. Leo had grown taller, his face glowing with a happiness that had completely erased the shadows of his past. The music shifted to a traditional bridal march. The guests, a mix of high-powered executives, brilliant engineers, and hospital staff, turned in their seats. Walking down the aisle was Vicky Turner. She was breathtaking in a flowing, elegant white gown, her face radiating a profound, unshakable joy. She wasn't the cold, impenetrable billionaire today. She was a woman who had fought through hell to save her family and had found her soulmate in the process. But there wasn't a dry eye in the house because of who was holding her hand. Walking beside her, matching her mother step for step, was Chloe. She was no longer wearing the heavy external exoskeleton. After a year of intense neural stimulation from Darby's suit, Chloe's biological spinal nerves had successfully bridged the damaged gap. Today, she wore only a pair of thin, discreet ankle braces hidden beneath her flower girl dress. She was walking on her own. As Vicky reached the altar, she let go of her daughter's hand. Chloe practically ran the last few steps, throwing her arms around Darby's waist. Darby knelt down, hugging the little girl tightly before standing up to take Vicky's hands. They had started as a disgraced mechanic and a terrifying CEO, brought together by a broken wheelchair and a medical nightmare. But as they looked into each other's eyes, surrounded by the children they had saved and the family they had built, they knew they were no longer defined by their pasts. They had fixed the broken pieces of each other's lives, engineering a beautiful, perfect future. Did this story of a father's genius and a mother's relentless love leave you in tears? If you want to see more incredible real-life stories of dramatic twists, heart-stopping revenge, and beautiful redemptions, please hit that like button right now. Share this amazing video with your friends and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another unbelievable tale. Hit the notification bell and drop a comment below.